It was the kind of silence that made your ears ring. No broken glass, no jimmied lock, no muddy footprints. Just one perfectly made bed in a child's room. And a pillow with a single red dot no bigger than a dime. The girl was gone. The front door was locked from the inside. And no one, not even the mother, heard a damn thing. Sheriff Clint Daniels stared at that dot for a long time. Longer than anyone in the room was comfortable with. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. Then he turned slowly to the distraught woman shaking in the hallway. "You said the dog didn't bark." She shook her head. "Not once. It didn't make sense. There were no signs of struggle. The neighbors hadn't seen a soul." The security camera on the garage mysteriously stopped recording at 3:12 a.m., then picked up again 2 hours later. No motion, no glitch, just a missing little girl named Lily Parker, age 7, pink pajamas, a unicorn plush named Mooney she never slept without, and a bloodstain, but not just a bloodstain. To K9 Tango, it was a starting line. Tango had been restless in the cruiser from the moment they pulled up. He was a 4-year-old German shepherd, lean and serious, with sharp ears and a stare that could pin a grown man to a wall. His nose was better than any piece of tech the department had, and he knew it. He wasn't wagging his tail or bouncing around like some overeager pup. No, Tango sat tall and still, eyes locked on the house like he was waiting to be invited in. Clint opened the door. "You're up." Tango hopped out, sniffed the air once, then trotted straight through the front door as if he lived there. Inside, the little girl's room looked untouched. No mess, no overturned furniture, not even a window cracked open. Just that pillow, and the faintest scent of copper that only a trained nose like Tango's could follow. He sniffed it once, then again. Then he bolted out of the room so fast the deputy tripped trying to keep up. Clint didn't even need to give the command. Tango was already in motion, pulling hard on the leash, heading straight down the front walk. Not toward the sidewalk. Not toward the road, not even toward the woods behind the neighborhood. Tango shot left and ran. "Where the hell is he going?" the deputy asked, panting as he jogged behind. But Clint had seen this before. He knows. They followed the dog past 3 blocks, through a drainage ditch, across a small creek, and into the overgrown back lot of a long-abandoned church. The sun had barely started to rise, casting a golden haze through the mist. It was quiet. Too quiet. No birds, no crickets. Just the sound of Tango's paws pounding the frost-covered grass. Then he stopped, dead still, one paw raised, ears up, and then a low growl. It was there, under the collapsed porch of the church's old rectory. Tango scratched at the wood once, then barked loud and hard enough to wake the whole town. Clint drew his sidearm. "Stay behind me." They didn't find Lily. Not yet. But they did find something. A torn piece of fabric. Pink cotton, with a tiny unicorn decal. "Matches her PJs," Clint muttered, bagging it carefully. There were scratch marks on the floorboards. Tiny ones. Fingernail size. And a rust-colored smear Clint didn't need a lab to tell him was blood. The trail was getting warmer. They radioed it in, then headed back to the cruiser. Tango didn't stop pacing, nose in the air, body tense. "He wants to keep going," the handler said. "Let him." Tango took off again, heading west this time, toward the tree line. The forest was dense, the kind that swallowed sound and made time feel like it moved slower. Clint knew these woods well. He'd hunted deer here with his dad. Took his son here once, before the divorce. But this wasn't about memory now. This was about instinct. Tango's. Every so often, the dog would stop, sniff, then sprint again, like he was reading a trail no one else could see. It wasn't until they crossed the 8-mile mark that the handler said what Clint had been thinking. "This is too far for a kid to walk. Someone brought her. If you care about the heroes who don't wear capes, but have paws, claws, and hearts full of fire, make sure to subscribe to Heroes for Animals on YouTube. These dogs aren't just pets. They're lifesavers. They found the cabin just before noon. Not a cabin, really. More like a hunting shack. Rotting wood, rusted hinges, vines climbing up the sides like fingers trying to choke it. Tango froze. He didn't growl. He didn't bark. He stared. And then he sat. Clint looked at the handler. He's waiting. Waiting for what? For backup? Clint said grimly. Same thing I'm about to call. Inside the shack was a mess of old gear, moldy blankets, and what looked like a trap door in the corner. It was nailed shut. Clint pried it open. The smell hit first. Mildew, dust, and something else, something coppery. They climbed down into a cramped cellar with no lights, just a hanging bulb swinging from a frayed wire. There was no one there, but in the corner was Mooney, the unicorn plush. Still warm. She was here, Clint whispered. Tango walked up to the toy, sniffed it once, then looked at the far wall. His ears twitched. What is it, boy? Tango stepped forward and pawed at the dirt. Clint grabbed a flashlight. There, behind the wall, a faint trail of dirt disturbed. Something heavy had been dragged. He touched his radio. We need drones in the air. Now. Back outside, Tango was pacing again. The leash barely held. He looked toward the ridge above the tree line and gave one sharp bark. They weren't done. Whoever took Lily had a plan, and Tango wasn't going to stop until she was home. The air in the forest had changed. It wasn't just cooler now. It was heavier. Like the trees were holding their breath. Clint Daniels had been a sheriff for nearly 2 decades, and still, he'd never trusted woods that went this quiet. He glanced at K9 Tango, whose body was taut like a coiled spring. The German shepherd's ears were up, his eyes scanning the ridge ahead. His nose twitched. He wasn't distracted, not even by the rustle of a squirrel or the gust of wind that shook the treetops. No, Tango was locked in, and Clint had learned long ago. If the dog was locked in, you followed. How far from the shack? The deputy asked, breath fogging in the chilly morning air. Clint didn't answer at first. He checked his GPS. We've gone 2 miles west. That's 10 miles from where she vanished. No way a 7-year-old made it out here by herself. Clint nodded slowly, which means someone brought her, and then ditched the place. Tango suddenly barked, one short, clipped sound, and darted toward a cluster of pine trees that formed a natural arch, almost like a tunnel. They hadn't noticed it before, but once the dog ran through, the team could see a faint trail of disturbed leaves, a snapped twig, and something else. Blood. Clint knelt and inspected it with a gloved finger. Fresh, within the last 12 hours. The deputy leaned closer. Same as the pillow? Clint didn't reply. Instead, he waved the drone tech forward. Put the bird in the air, now. They launched the drone from the clearing, the small whir of its blades cutting through the silence. On the screen, the forest unfurled in all directions, dark, green, gray, and endless. But after about 100 feet west of the pine tunnel, the drone picked up something unusual, a patch of earth that had been dug up and loosely recovered. Zoom in, Clint said. The image sharpened. They could see something metallic sticking from the dirt. A zipper. Hold Tango, Clint ordered, already moving. The earth was soft, recently disturbed. Clint knelt and began brushing it away gently. The zipper was attached to a small pink backpack, faded but unmistakable. It was Lily's. He opened it slowly. Inside, a water bottle, a granola bar, and a note, written in pencil, in a child's scrawl. I don't know where I am. Please help me. The handwriting trembled. Clint's stomach turned. He handed the note to his deputy, then turned back to the drone screen. Run thermal. Sweep that ridge line. The operator nodded, switching views. And there it was. A faint heat signature, small, low to the ground, moving. Tango's onto her, Clint said quietly. She's still alive. The team moved fast, but quietly. The last thing they wanted was to scare whoever else might be out there. Clint motioned for the handler to release Tango, and the dog took off like a shot. They followed him up the incline, boots crunching softly on frost and leaves. The trail was winding, narrow, barely visible to the human eye. But Tango had it. He stopped twice, both times sniffing the ground and circling an area. At one point, he scratched at a tree trunk, and they noticed the initials LP etched in fresh bark. "She left us a marker," Clint muttered. "She's thinking." They crested the hill and found a small rock overhang, partly covered in branches. Tango stood frozen in front of it, nose high, tail rigid. Clint signaled the team to fan out. Slowly, carefully, Clint crouched and peered inside. "Lily?" he called gently. "It's okay. You're safe now. My name's Clint. I'm here to help." No answer. But then, movement, a faint shuffle. Clint's heart jumped. Then, a voice, barely audible. "You found Mooney." Clint swallowed hard. "Yeah, we did. He's safe." He didn't push further, just stayed there, letting the silence settle. Tango stepped forward and lay down, wagging his tail once. Not fast, not excited, just enough to signal calm. Then slowly, a little face emerged from the shadows. Pale, dirt-smudged, eyes wide like saucers. It was her. Lily was cold, dehydrated, but alive. She clutched the unicorn plush tightly to her chest and didn't speak much, even as the medic wrapped her in a thermal blanket. But she didn't resist either. She let herself be helped. Clint crouched next to her. "You did real good, Lily. You're brave." She looked up at him, then at Tango, who sat quietly nearby, tongue out, tail thumping gently. "Is he real?" Clint smiled. "Very real. He never stopped looking for you." As they prepped Lily for the airlift, Clint stepped aside to take a call from the forensic team. They'd processed the shack and the cabin, and what they found wasn't good. "The place had cameras," the tech said, "hidden, motion-triggered. Weren't transmitting. They were recording to a hard drive." "Someone was watching," Clint muttered. "Yeah, and they were documenting, too. Maps, notes, newspaper clippings. You and your department were in a few." Clint's blood went cold. "Are you telling me this guy was planning something bigger?" "We think this wasn't his first attempt," the voice said quietly. "And we don't think he was working alone." Back at the clearing, Tango hadn't taken his eyes off Lily. She was being tended to by paramedics, but every time she shifted, the dog perked up. "He's protecting her already," said the handler. Clint nodded. "He knows she's not out of danger yet." The drone pilot ran over, pale. "Sheriff, you need to see this." He handed Clint a tablet. Another thermal scan, this one from a different ridge. 2 heat signatures. Adult-sized, stationary, watching from above. "Do we engage?" the deputy asked. Clint studied the screen. "No," he said finally. "We let him think we didn't see." As the helicopter lifted off with Lily, Tango sat below, eyes following it until it disappeared beyond the trees. The team began packing up, but Clint didn't move. His gaze was locked on the far ridge, where he now knew, without a doubt, someone else was still watching them, planning something, and this time, they'd left witnesses. The wind shifted. It carried a new scent across the ridge. Pine and soil, but something else, too. Something that smelled like rot. Sheriff Clint Daniels didn't flinch. He just narrowed his eyes and stared up at the tree line across from him, where 2 figures had stood just an hour ago, watching as the search team lifted Lily Parker out by helicopter. They were gone now, but the sense of being hunted had remained. Tango circled the clearing one last time, nose to the ground, occasionally glancing back at Clint like he was asking permission to keep going. Clint gave a small nod. "Go on, boy, show me what they left behind." The German shepherd trotted to a mossy patch near the log where Lily had been found. He sniffed once, then again, and suddenly let out a single low growl. Clint moved toward him quickly. "What is it?" Tango didn't bark this time. Instead, he began to dig. Not fast or frantic. Just steady, deliberate pawing, like he'd done back at the old shack. Clint crouched beside him, brushing away the loose dirt. There, half buried in the soil, was something that made his heart drop. A baby monitor. "Jesus," said the deputy, staring over Clint's shoulder. He was listening the whole time. Or someone was, Clint muttered. The device was still warm. Fresh batteries. It had been transmitting up until recently. But where was the receiver? Clint turned slowly, scanning the trees above them. Then he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it. A creak, wood flexing under weight. He looked up and spotted it. High in a pine, maybe 30 feet up, was a homemade tree stand, the kind hunters used during deer season. Except this one wasn't for hunting game. It had a tripod, a camcorder bolted to the side, and a broken antenna wire flapping in the breeze. "No wonder we never saw him," Clint said. "He's been in the trees." They called in a climbing unit and secured the structure. The video cam had a full memory card inside. Back at the command tent, they plugged it in and watched the screen go black for a moment before footage appeared. Grainy night vision, but clear enough to make everyone in the room go silent. At first, just forest. Trees, wind, movement. Then Lily, stumbling, barefoot, half asleep, led by a man whose face never entered the frame. Just his hand, large, calloused, wearing a military-style glove. Clint's jaw tightened. The timestamp read 3:19 a.m., just 7 minutes after the security footage from the Parker home had gone black. "She wasn't taken violently," the deputy said quietly. "She was lured." Clint stared at the screen. Or she was drugged. The camera panned slowly to the left. And there it was. A second child. Smaller, younger. A boy, maybe 4, holding a stuffed bear. He wasn't listed in any missing persons reports. Clint's chest tightened. "Where the hell is that kid now?" They paused the video and backed up. Something odd caught their attention. Each time the man stepped, there was a faint metallic clinking sound, not loud but consistent. The same sound over and over, in sync with his left foot. The audio tech leaned in. "That's a limp, steel brace or orthopedic plate. Or combat injury," Clint said under his breath. The tech nodded. "That narrows our suspect pool. We can cross-reference VA records with local veterans who own property near the ridge." Clint tapped the monitor. "No, start with dishonorably discharged." Meanwhile, Tango wasn't done. The dog led Clint and 2 deputies to the eastern side of the ridge, where the drone had first picked up the figures watching from above. The terrain was tricky. Steep drop-offs, loose shale. But Tango had no trouble navigating it. Halfway down the slope, the dog stopped and sat, his signal that something important was nearby. "What do you smell, buddy?" Clint asked. Tango stood, walked about 10 feet forward, and began pawing at a pile of leaves. They cleared the area and found a plastic storage bin, camouflaged with brown paint and duct tape. Inside, zip ties, cough syrup, a burner phone, and a notebook. Clint picked it up slowly. It wasn't labeled. He opened to the first page. Hand-drawn maps, the same ones from the old shack. Trails, hiding spots. Dots marked with names. Names they recognized. "This wasn't a kidnapping," Clint muttered. "It was a test run." The notebook went on to list times and locations. Kids' bus stops, public parks, even a school playground 2 towns over. There were notes about patrol schedules, dog activity, drone use. He flipped to the last page, written in thick, angry ink. "The dog ruins everything." Clint showed it to the handler. "He's talking about Tango." That night, Clint sat at his desk at the station, poring over everything they had. Photos, evidence logs, audio files. A wall of maps and strings that looked more like a military strategy room than a sheriff's office. But it wasn't enough. They had found Lily. They had clues, but whoever this guy was, he wasn't done. And he wasn't alone. It was past 1 a.m. when the knock came. Clint looked up from his desk. It was Deputy Sarah Quinn. Young, sharp, former FBI field agent who'd relocated for small-town life after burnout. She held up her tablet. "You're gonna want to see this." She played a voicemail sent to the tip line 15 minutes ago. A man's voice, distorted, low. "You found the girl. Good job, Sheriff." Clint sat up straighter. "But you left the boy." The voice laughed. A dry, sick chuckle. "He'll be quieter than she was." Then a click. End of message. Clint's voice dropped. "Trace it." Sarah was already on it. "We're bouncing through 6 proxies, but it originated near a cell tower just outside Monroe County. That's 30 miles east." Clint grabbed his jacket. "Wake up, Tango. We're going hunting." Outside, the dog was already awake, sitting by the cruiser, as if he'd been waiting the whole time. The air was cold, the moon bright. Leaves rustled overhead. And somewhere, out there in the dark, a little boy was still waiting to be found. Monroe County was quiet that time of night. Not the kind of quiet that comforts you. The kind that makes your bones itch. Too still. Too controlled. Like the silence was deliberate. Sheriff Clint Daniels drove with the windows cracked, letting the fall air chill the inside of the cruiser. His hand rested lightly on the steering wheel. The other thumbed through his field notebook. Every detail from the notebook recovered in the woods was etched into his brain. The dots, the names, the routes. Tango sat in the back seat, eyes wide open, body tense but still. He hadn't laid down since they left the station. His head was cocked toward the wind, nose working overtime. "You'll know before I do," Clint muttered, glancing at the mirror. "You always do." The signal from the burner phone that delivered the taunting voicemail had pinged off a remote tower near an old highway rest stop, long abandoned after the new freeway bypass had opened. It was the kind of place teenagers used to sneak off to for parties, then stopped once the stories started. Stories about voices in the woods, about seeing things and people that didn't belong. Clint pulled onto the gravel shoulder, headlights off. The spot hadn't seen maintenance in years. Cracked pavement, overgrown brush, and the rusted skeleton of a payphone stood like a sentinel in the dark. Tango jumped out without needing a command. The dog trotted ahead, slow and methodical. Clint followed with his flashlight low and sidearm drawn. The air smelled of mildew, motor oil, and something fainter. Old firewood, maybe. Something had burned out here recently. They passed the shell of a bathroom structure. Its roof caved in, and a busted vending machine turned on its side. Tango stopped at a trash can and sniffed. Clint squatted beside him, in the dirt, 2 flattened cigarette butts and an empty juice box. Children's juice, apple-flavored. The expiration date was next month. "Someone's been feeding a kid here," Clint whispered. Tango suddenly jerked his head to the right. A sound. It was soft. Too soft for human ears. But Tango had already taken off. Clint followed the dog down an old footpath behind the lot, nearly invisible beneath fallen leaves. The flashlight beam bounced through the trees, catching movement. A possum. A raccoon. But Tango didn't care about them. They reached a small clearing, half surrounded by thick brush and low-hanging branches. And there, almost completely hidden, was a pile of firewood stacked in a perfect square. Too perfect. Tango circled once, then barked, loud and sharp. "Hold," Clint whispered. He crept forward and moved a log. Then another. Underneath wasn't firewood at all. It was a wooden hatch, bolted shut. "Backup's 15 minutes out," Clint muttered into the radio. "We're going in now." He pried the hatch open slowly, the hinges squealing with rust. A cold breath of air drifted up from the hole, moist and stale. Tango didn't wait. He jumped down into the darkness. Clint followed with his flashlight and sidearm. The tunnel wasn't deep, maybe 6 feet down, but it stretched sideways like an old root cellar. The air was dense and smelled of dirt, plastic, and old sweat. The flashlight beam swept left and right. Empty crates, a broken bucket, torn insulation, and then a sleeping bag. Small, blue, covered in cartoon dinosaurs. Clint's heart skipped. Tango approached it cautiously, sniffed and wagged once. The bag was warm. Whoever had been here was just here. Then a whisper, not a loud one, not frightened, just tired. "Are you here to take me home?" Clint spun his flashlight. There, crouched behind a stack of crates, was a boy, no older than 4, dark blonde hair, dirt-smeared face, barefoot. He was holding a stuffed bear missing one eye. Clint holstered his weapon and lowered himself to a knee. "Yeah, buddy, I'm here for you." The boy blinked. "Is Tango your dog?" "No, he's yours now." Clint radioed in the recovery. EMTs were dispatched, and the boy was airlifted out, cold but alive. He was nonverbal after that, wouldn't speak to anyone else, but he kept whispering to the bear. Clint rode in the second vehicle back, Tango beside him, head out the window. Another child saved. But this wasn't a win. Not yet, because they still didn't know the boy's name, and there was no missing persons report that matched. At sunrise, Clint stood in the old rest stop's clearing, staring down at the now empty hatch. Something didn't sit right. "Sheriff!" Deputy Quinn called, running over with her phone. "We got a hit from state records." She handed him the screen. The boy's name was Isaac Garvey, reported missing 26 days ago, but not by his parents, by his preschool teacher. Parents had claimed they withdrew him for homeschooling. When the teacher got suspicious and asked to visit the house, the family moved overnight. That's when Clint noticed the last name. "Garvey?" he asked. Sarah nodded. "Dad's name is Ethan Garvey, former military. Dishonorably discharged 2016. Assault charges sealed by court order." Clint's grip tightened. Ethan Garvey. That was the name written in the upper right corner of the old notebook they found. Hours later, Clint stood back at the station, staring at the wall of evidence now spanning 2 whiteboards. 2 kids, saved, both found in places prepared for holding them, mapped out in advance, camouflaged, and monitored. Whoever was behind this wasn't just opportunistic. They were planning something. Then came the break. Sarah burst into the room. "We got another voicemail. Same voice." She played the recording. "You're getting good at this, Sheriff, but there's always a third." Clint froze. Tango stood up suddenly. "Play that again," Clint said. Sarah did. Tango growled. "There's always a third," Clint repeated under his breath. "What does that mean? Third victim?" Sarah shook her head. "We only found 2 kids." Clint looked at the calendar on the wall. Then it hit him. "We've been reading this wrong. He's not talking about a 3rd child." Sarah frowned. "Then what?" Clint looked up. "He means a 3rd location." He flipped back through the recovered maps, now memorized in his mind. One mark had never been explored. An old ranger tower deep inside the national forest. It had been closed since 2011 after a wildfire damaged the supports. On the map, it was circled twice. Next to it, someone had written a single word. Staging. Clint didn't wait for backup this time. He grabbed Tango, jumped into the cruiser, and floored it down the gravel access road into the woods. The tower wasn't on any active grid. No cell service, no live camera feeds. It was the perfect ghost. Until now. They arrived just before sundown. The tower loomed above the trees, blackened from fire damage but still standing. Its base creaked in the wind. Clint approached slowly. Then a rustle. Tango barked once and sprinted up the rickety stairs. Clint followed, heart racing. Inside the cabin at the top, nothing. Empty room, broken cot, water jug. And in the middle of the floor, a photo of Tango, stapled to a map, with 3 red X's, and scribbled across the bottom in block letters. "You found 2? The 3rd won't be alive." The ranger tower creaked in the wind like it was alive. Sheriff Clint Daniels stared at the photo of Tango stapled to the map. The 3 red X's burned into his mind. 2 of them were crossed out. The shack, the root cellar. The 3rd, unmarked. The message was clear. You found 2. The 3rd won't be alive. Clint felt a deep chill in his chest, the kind you can't shake, even with a blanket or fire. He turned the photo over. Just a single word was scribbled on the back in jagged handwriting. "Beneath." He stared at it for the moment, then looked at Tango, who stood perfectly still, head cocked. His ears twitched. And then Tango moved. Not fast, not erratic, but slow and focused, toward the far corner of the tower floorboards. He sniffed, sat, then barked. Clint knelt down and tapped the floor with his flashlight. It was hollow. A trap door. Of course! He pried it open and was hit with that now too familiar scent. Soil, mold, and something faintly metallic. Blood, maybe. But it was stale. He aimed his light down the hole. Nothing but packed dirt and a rotted rope ladder that dropped into black. Clint radioed back to base. Found a third location. Sending coordinates. I'm going in. You sure you want to do that alone? Deputy Quinn's voice crackled through. Not alone, Clint said and looked at Tango. They descended together. The makeshift pit was deeper than expected. 20 feet, maybe more. But the bottom had been dug out into a crude chamber. The air was heavy and wet. The walls were lined with planks, almost like someone had tried to turn it into a bunker. And in the center, a wooden chair, chains, and a pile of burned rope. No person, but something else. A military patch, torn, smudged. 82nd Airborne Division. Clint's breath caught in his throat. We just ID'd our guy. He pulled out his notebook and flipped to the Garvey file. Ethan Garvey, former Army. Dishonorable discharge. Conduct unbecoming. Psychological hold. Rumored to have PTSD after an ambush overseas, but the court-martial had been sealed. Clint held up the patch and called it in. We need eyes on Garvey's last known residence. Call Fort Vance. See if they still have a contact in Psych Ops who remembers him. Tango pawed at something beside the chair, a strip of cloth. Clint picked it up. A child's sock, still warm. She was here, he whispered. Clint climbed out and stared off into the trees. There was no time to wait for backup. Garvey had a head start, but he was desperate now. Leaving messages. Leaving evidence. He wanted to be seen. Or worse, he wanted them to find the body. Tango suddenly growled. Not down, but up. Clint looked toward the tree line where the fading sun lit up something strange. A red flag tied to a branch, bright and fluttering in the wind. Clint and Tango sprinted toward it. They broke through the brush and found a wide clearing littered with old hunting gear. Scent traps, wire snares, trail cams nailed to trees. Clint yanked one of the cameras down and checked the SD card. Dozens of images. Kids, all different. Some asleep, some crying, all alone. He felt sick. Then Tango barked sharply. Not once, but 3 times, fast and frantic. Clint turned. There, tangled in the roots of a massive oak, was a hand. Small, pale, motionless. Clint dropped to his knees, began digging with his bare hands. But it wasn't a body. It was a doll's hand, part of a lifelike child mannequin. Clint stared at it in disbelief. A trap! Tango growled again and turned. From behind them, footsteps. Heavy, cracking twigs. No attempt to hide. Clint rose slowly, gun raised. Come out! A figure emerged. Tall, bearded, camo jacket, brace on his left knee. It was him, Ethan Garvey. But he wasn't holding a weapon, just a folded photo in his hand. Clint aimed. Don't move. Garvey didn't blink. You're late. Clint edged closer. Where's the girl? Garvey raised the photo. On it, a grainy black and white image of Tango, paw raised beside Lily in the woods. She was the first one he got right, Garvey said softly. The only one who saw him as good. You hurt her, I swear.
I didn't lay a finger on her, Garvey interrupted. You don't understand. They were supposed to be saved.
Clint steadied his stance. Put the photo down. But Garvey didn't. He crumpled it in his fist. They never listened to me. Not the army, not the courts, not even the churches. And now? Now I have a voice, he said, grinning, and a plan. But I left a message for the girl. She's safe, for now. Garvey lunged, not at Clint, but into the trees. Clint fired once, warning shot. Tango bolted past him. They chased through thickets and over rock beds until Garvey tripped and crashed into a shallow ravine. Tango was on him in seconds, teeth bared, but didn't bite. Just stood over him, barking loud and hard. Clint cuffed him, panting. "Where's the third kid?" Garvey smiled through bloody teeth. "She's at the tree, the one that remembers everything." "What tree?" "You'll know it when you hear her." That night, Clint stared at the map again. The third red X didn't mark a structure or clearing. It marked a tree, an old one standing alone near a bend in the creek, where the town used to hang lanterns every 4th of July. He and his dad used to fish there when he was a boy. He knew the place, and Tango already had his nose to the door. They arrived just after midnight. The air was still, cold. The tree stood tall and wide, an ancient oak with roots the size of tires. Clint approached slowly, Tango beside him. And then, a faint sound, muffled, from underground. He dropped to his knees and pressed his ear to the earth. A cry, soft, desperate, still alive. "Get me that shovel!" he shouted into the radio. "Now!" They dug fast. 6 inches, 12, 18. Then wood. They pried it open. Inside, a small child, barely 6. Pale, shivering, mouth taped, wrists bound but eyes wide open. Clint scooped her up into his arms. She burst into sobs. "I got you," he whispered, fighting back tears. "I got you." Tango licked the girl's cheek once. She smiled, just barely. And for Clint, for all the horror, all the noise, that whisper of a smile beneath the leaves was the loudest sound he'd ever heard. The girl's name was Emily. She was 6 years old, missing for 2 days. Buried beneath the ancient oak just off Mill Creek. The third red X on the map, alive, by some miracle, thanks to a plastic air pipe poking up through the roots and the work of a search dog who simply refused to give up. As Clint carried her to the medics, Tango circled them like a soldier escorting a VIP. He wouldn't let anyone get closer unless Clint gave a nod. When Emily clung to Clint's collar with both arms, refusing to let go, the dog let out a quiet whimper. Not of worry, but relief. She was safe, but something still wasn't right. By morning, the town had woken to the news of 3 children rescued. People who'd barely spoken to each other in years were dropping off stuffed animals at the station. The town diner handed out free coffee to anyone in uniform. The fire department set up a makeshift vigil by the courthouse steps. But Clint didn't celebrate. He was at his desk with a stale cup of black coffee and Tango curled up under his chair, one eye still open, ears twitching every few seconds. The case was technically closed. Garvey was in custody. The kids were safe. The woods were cleared. So why couldn't Clint shake the feeling that something, or someone, was still out there? He reopened the notebook found in the false floor of the Ranger Tower. He flipped past the maps, past the codes, and the lists of parks and schoolyards. Then he saw it again, a line written sideways along the spine. "He always comes back to the dog." Clint read it twice, 3 times. What did that mean? Who was he? Was it Garvey writing about himself or someone else? At that moment, Deputy Quinn entered the office holding a folder. "You're gonna want to see this." It was a background check. Not on Garvey, but on his brother, Leland Garvey. No criminal record, no military history. But he was a wildlife officer for the state for 7 years. Reassigned twice. Quietly let go. No press, no charges. And he owned property. Not in Monroe County, but 60 miles north, outside of town jurisdiction. A remote hunting lease near the state line. Clint looked at Tango. The dog stood before Clint could speak a word. An hour later, they pulled onto a narrow gravel road that hadn't been driven in months. The property was fenced, but the gate was unlocked. Clint parked just outside and moved on foot. Tango walked ahead, alert but not aggressive. The kind of alert that meant something was close, but watching. There were no buildings on the property, just an open clearing and a shallow creek that ran red with fall leaves. And in the center, a pile of ash. Clint knelt down. It wasn't just firewood. There were bones in it. Animal, maybe. but also something else. Plastic, metal fragments, a burned camera lens. Tango walked to the edge of the clearing and stopped, then barked. Once, twice, again. The kind of bark Clint knew meant, pay attention, now. He moved toward him and found a thin trail leading into the brush. And at the end of it, a tree stump, clean cut, and on top, a collar. It was old, cracked leather, no tag, but Clint recognized it. It belonged to a canine named Rex, a dog that had gone missing 4 years ago from another county during a child recovery operation. The official report had said, presumed lost in action. But here it was. The final clue. Leland Garvey hadn't just been part of the operation. He'd been watching it for years, studying the dogs, studying the handlers, treating it like some kind of game. And now, he was gone. No footprints, no scent, nothing but the ash. Back at the station, Clint updated the case file to reflect what they knew, and more importantly, what they didn't. Leland was officially labeled a person of interest, but with no body, no prints, and no sightings, there was nothing more they could do. Still, the town moved on. The kids were recovering. The town's mayor gave Clint a medal he never wore. Emily, the last girl they found, started therapy and was slowly speaking again. Her first full sentence came 2 weeks later, in a whisper. Tango found me. Clint visited her one afternoon at the hospital. Emily had drawn him a picture of a tall man and a big brown dog standing next to a tree. Underneath, in shaky handwriting, it read, I heard him barking. That's how I knew I was still alive. That night, Clint sat on his porch with Tango at his feet, the sky bruised with stars, a beer sweating in his hand. You did good, buddy, he said softly. Tango licked his fingers, then laid his head down. But an hour later, just as Clint was about to turn in for the night, Tango stood, walked to the edge of the porch, and barked. Not loud, not frantic, just one bark, toward the woods, as if to say, I still hear something. Thank you for following this story all the way through. The bond between a handler and a canine isn't just about commands. It's about trust, instinct, and sacrifice. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Leland Garvey is still out there? Or was someone else behind it all along? Let us know your theory in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Heroes for Animals for more incredible stories of rescue, loyalty, and courage.